Lycopus americanus. Nickname for this plant is backspine. This is part 1, and in part 2 I will be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant for identifying purposes. Be sure to watch all of part 1 so that part 2 is understandable. This is an erect plant. It's weedy, grows up to 3 feet tall. This picture shows us an example of how the leaf pairs are arranged. Notice how they are widely spaced along the stem, resembling a backspine. Each leaf grows opposite of one another. And notice how each pair is perpendicular to the pair above or below it. So, from a top view, a pair above and a pair below will form a cross or an X shape. The upper leaves are coarsely toothed. The lower leaves are somewhat different. We'll see a picture of those later. And the lower leaves is the only way that, or the primary way, that this species of Lycopus can be distinguished from others. There are tiny flowers. They are in clusters, approximately 20, which encircle the stem just above each leaf pair. The flowers are white to pinkish. They don't have any stalks. And as you see here in this example, the flowers are rarely all opened at the same time. Now the stems can be green or reddish brown. They are hairless or just slightly hairy. The stems are also square. We'll see a better example of that in a later slide. This picture shows us a lower leaf. What's different about this leaf is the lower portion, which you will see is very deeply lobed, and the lobes end in points, just as each coarse teeth does. These leaves are hairless except for a few hairs along the central vein on the lower leaf surface. Any of the leaves along the stalk have no leaf stem or a very short leaf stem. This is another example of one of the lower leaves and how, again, the lower portion of this leaf is deeply lobed while the upper portion of the blade is consistent with the upper leaf shape or fashion, which is more coarsely toothed and more of an entire leaf. Leaf shapes are characterized as being lance, or a mix between an oval and lance shape. These leaves can be up to 3 inches long. The 2 leaves here are lower leaves. Again, deeply lobed here at the bottom, while the upper leaves are more entire. Square stem, recognized as being, or stems in botany are described as being hairless or slightly hairy, and this is obviously one that is slightly hairy. Tiny flowers again clustered around the stem, approximately 20 or more, just above where the upper leaf pairs meet the stem. Very rarely are all of the flowers opened at the same time. This picture shows us an example of the stamen. There are 2, each with a white filament, and the anthers, or the tips here, in this case they are purplish, but they can also be a pale yellow. They rise high above the flower, or technically this is referred to as a calyx, and appear to have 4 petals, which are essentially lobes of the calyx. Each tiny flower has a notch here on the upper lobe. They are smooth on the outside. They have dense patches of hair inside, as you see. I would also point out the correction. I referred to this part of the flower as the calyx. Instead, this is referred to as the corolla. I was about to point out to you now the green structures here which surround the flower, the unopened flower that is. These green parts are what is technically referred to as a calyx. They have 5 lobes or 5 teeth. They are also hairless. This is a picture of the seeds. They have 3 sides. They're referred to as nutlets. And near the top, they become more rounded and smooth. And at the bottom, they're more narrow. Flat on top. Calyxes that I was referring to earlier. These have turned brown already. And the seeds come from out of these 5-toothed calyxes. The edible parts of this plant are the roots, which are a combination of a taproot and a creeping root or raceme. For more information about this plant, go to survivalplantsmemorycourse.com. Right there on the home page, you'll find the plant index and click on Lycopus americanus, water horehound, or backspine. Thank you for watching. This has been part 1, and in part 2 I'll be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant for identifying purposes.